The world of Vardos IX once glittered beneath twin suns, its manufactoria belching sacred smoke that reached for the heavens like a hymn of steel. Its people lived and labored in the name of the Emperor, their days measured in toil and prayer. For 10,000 years, the planetary tide flowed upward to terra food, weapons, soldiers, the lifeblood of imperial faith. And then, one day, it stopped. Asterisk, no one knows who gave the order first. The planetary governor, the planetary defense force, or perhaps the rogue preacher, whose voice echoed through the hive spires like a revelation. But the edict came, and it spread like a contagion. The Emperor is dead. The Imperium lies. We will no longer serve ghosts. Asterisk, the transmission reached neighboring systems within hours. And when the Adeptus Administratum received the message on Terra, it was already too late. The eyes of the Inquisition turned toward Vardos IX, and with that gaze came the promise of annihilation. Asterisk, Vardos IX had defied the Imperium, and in the grim darkness of the far future, such defiance is not rebellion, it is damnation. Asterisk, before we descend into the ashes of that doomed world, ensure your own devotion remains unwavering. Strike the like, swear the oath of subscription, and stand with those who remember the Emperor's light, for soon, you will see what becomes of those who abandon it. Asterisk, beneath the steel heavens of Vardos IX, faith corrodes faster than metal. This chapter opens amid the smoke and song of a world convinced of its freedom. The citizens dream of self-rule, unaware that their rebellion has already sealed their fate. Through the eyes of an ordinary worker, we glimpse the first cracks forming beneath the illusion of hope. Asterisk, in the deepest hablocks, where rust replaces gold and devotion becomes hunger, a preacher rises. His words ignite the hearts of millions, not with faith, but with fury, as the governor's palace trembles beneath the crowd's roar. The first signs of the Imperium's vengeance begin to whisper through the void. Asterisk, from the outer dark, the sky itself begins to burn. Imperial forces arrive to reclaim the world, not for salvation, but for judgment. The people of Vardos learn the meaning of compliance as the skies weep fire, and the Emperor's justice falls like a blade. The chapter unfolds in the chaos of orbital bombardment and faithless repentance. Asterisk, the rebellion ends not with surrender, but with silence. The world becomes a grave of glass and ash, its air filled with the static echoes of lost prayers. But in the ruins, survivors crawl, haunted by what they have done, and by what hunts them in the Emperor's name. Asterisk, centuries later, the name Vardos IX is erased from the Imperial Cartographica. Official records mark it only as expunged by order of the Ordo Hereticus. Yet whispers persist that something still stirs beneath its dead soil, a final reflection on what defiance costs, and how even a single world's heresy can echo forever in the void. Asterisk, the first light of Vardos IX bled through the smoke-stained atmosphere, like a wound that never healed. Dawn here was not the coming of day, but the soft ignition of forges, the tremor of machinery awakening to its endless rhythm. From orbit, the world gleamed with promise, a lattice of manufactoria, spires, and hive cities rising from rust-colored plains. But within, beneath the choking air and the hiss of servitors purging waste gas, hope was a thing long buried. Asterisk, for 10,000 years, Vardos had served the Imperium faithfully. Its forges produced the lastbacks that armed the Astra Militarum. Its refineries fed the machine spirits of void ships, and its people sang hymns to the golden throne with cracked lips. Faith was law, and obedience, survival. But somewhere between the endless tides and the uncounted generations, something broke. Not all at once, but slowly, like the hairline crack in a pressure valve. Silent until it bursts. Asterisk, among the hives, whispers began to replace prayers. The administratum's decrees grew harsher, their quotas heavier. The tithe collectors came not yearly but monthly, escorted by pallid skittery, whose eyes burned red through the mist. Vox sermons from the local ecclesiarchy shrieked louder than ever, proclaiming the Emperor's eternal glory. But every voice that shouts too often begins to sound afraid. Asterisk, one such voice belonged to Tavian Holt, a laborer in Manufactorum Delta 7, a man of 30 standard years, who had never seen the open sky. His eyes were gray from dust, his hands calloused from a lifetime of obedience. Tavian did not think of rebellion, for rebellion was a word forbidden even in thought. Yet, when the power conduits flickered one shift cycle, and the Vox feed fell silent for the first time in his life, he felt something strange stir inside him, not fear, but quiet. Asterisk, it was in that silence he heard the first rumors. That the governor's tithe transports had been denied clearance from orbit, that the ecclesiarch of Vardos had vanished during evening mass, and that the imperial aquila above the palace gates had been covered with a black cloth. No one dared speak of it openly, yet the city's pulse changed. Men paused before bowing to the shrines. Women no longer recited the litanies before their sons left for the work lines. In the underhive, someone had scrawled a forbidden phrase on a wall of rusted metal. The Emperor is dust. Asterisk at first, the enforcers purged such heresy with flamer and chain, but for every name they erased, 10 more whispered in the shadows. Faith is strong, but hunger is stronger, and the rations had been cut again. The overseers claimed that shipments from off-world had failed to arrive. The workers claimed that the overseers were lying. Both were right. In their way, Tavian's shift leader, an old man named Corin, once served as a lay preacher in the local chapel. He had been faithful his whole life. Yet one day he came to work with his rosarius torn from his neck. When Tavian asked him why, Corin only laughed a dry, rasping sound like ash in the lungs. "You ever heard the Emperor answer a prayer, lad?" he asked. "No." Then maybe he stopped listening. That night, Tavian dreamed of terror, though he had never seen it. Every imperial citizen carried its image in their mind. The shining cradle of mankind, radiant beneath the Emperor's light. But, in his dream, the sky above Terra was dark. The golden throne was empty. The Astronomicon flickered like a dying flame. He woke with the taste of metal on his tongue, and the sound of distant chanting echoing through the pipes. Outside his hablock, the voxcasters were blaring again, louder than ever. "Faith is strength," they cried. "Faith is obedience." But the words no longer felt like truth. They felt like chains being rattled. When Tavian reached the manufactorum that morning, he found the gates closed and the overseers arguing in hushed tones. The planetary data slate, they said, had gone unanswered by the off-world administratum for 6 solar days. No tithe orders. No new directives. Nothing. Even the orbital vox traffic had fallen silent. For the first time in living memory, Vardos IX stood alone. And in that absence of authority, that moment of terrible quiet, men began to imagine freedom. The silence lasted only a few days, but it changed everything. Without orders from orbit, production slowed, and the once unthinkable happened. The great forges of Delta 7 dimmed. The sound of engines faltering was almost sacred in its wrongness. Men who had known only the thunder of labor for their entire lives now stood listening to the stillness, like mourners at a grave. The administratum's local representatives were the first to vanish. Their shuttle took off under the cover of night, escorted by a single flight of battered gun cutters. Some claimed they were fleeing to the nearest loyal world. Others whispered that they had been seized by the planetary militia. No one truly knew. The official Vox line claimed temporary communication interference. But on Vardos IX, lies were as common as dust, and truth no longer mattered. By the second week, the streets of High Vardos Primus began to shift. Propaganda hololiths still blazed across the skyline, showing the imperial Aquila, flanked by words of devotion: servi, believe, endure. But the people no longer looked up. Markets opened with ration scraps instead of sanctioned goods. Soldiers on patrol spoke softly, their eyes darting to the rooftops. The tension was a living thing, coiled and hungry. Tavian found himself drawn to the lower levels of the hive. After his shifts ended, he told himself it was curiosity. But deep down he knew it was something darker. The need to feel alive in a world that had forgotten what that meant. The underhive was a maze of flickering lumen strips, rusted walkways, and the stench of burnt promethium. It was there, amid the dripping pipes and whispering shadows, that he first heard the name, Merek Dalen. Merek was a preacher once, or so the stories went, a man of the ecclesiarchy, who had seen too much and returned from the frontier. With eyes that no longer wept at the sight of an imperial shrine. They said he had touched the warp and survived. They said his sermons were forbidden, that he spoke not of salvation, but of liberation. To Tavian, those stories sounded like madness. But madness, in the dark, is often mistaken for revelation. He found the crowd in a derelict chapel beneath the manufactorum. The great stone statue of the Emperor had been defaced, its face wrapped in black cloth, its arms reaching skyward as if in mourning. Dozens of workers and scavengers knelt in silence, their heads bowed not in prayer but in expectation. When Merek Dalen entered, the air itself seemed to tighten. He was tall, gaunt, his features sharp as a blade. His robes were those of a priest, but torn and oil-stained. His voice, when it came, was soft, not commanding, but intimate, like the whisper of a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. You have all served, he said. You have all bled. You have all waited for a sign that never came. Tell me, he raised a hand. Has the Emperor ever spoken to you? The crowd was still. A single sob answered him. Asterisk, he is silent. Merek continued, not because he sleeps, but because he is gone. The Imperium is a corpse that refuses to fall. It drains us to feed its hollow throne. And we keep it alive because we are afraid to see it die. Asterisk, Tavian felt his breath catch. Around him, heads nodded. Faces that had once glowed with the fervor of the creed, now glimmered with something else. The raw light of belief turned inward. Asterisk, the truth. Merek said, his eyes burning, is that the Emperor does not need your faith. You do. And if he will not speak, then speak for yourselves. Build your own dawn. Asterisk, there was no roar, no uprising, just silence, but it was the silence of something being born. Asterisk, when Tavian returned home that night, he found his neighbor burning his shrine candles, not in worship, but in defiance. The ashes drifted into the vents, black motes against the hum of failing power lines. Asterisk, days passed, and more workers disappeared into the under. Patrols grew thinner. The planetary governor, Lord Halbrecht Vaughan, issued a decree calling for unquestioned loyalty to the throne. Yet his words felt hollow, even desperate. His own palace lights flickered during his broadcast, and behind him the once bright banners of the Imperium hung tattered and grey. Asterisk, something vast was moving beneath the surface. Not an army, not yet, but an idea. And in the Imperium of man, ideas are the most dangerous weapons of all. Asterisk, by the end of that month, the first manufactoria refused to resume operation. Entire shifts vanished into the tunnels. The Adeptus Arbits declared martial law in Hive Primus, but their presence only fed the flames. Tavian watched from the balcony of his hablock as Trace Sophia cut through the night sky. Brief flashes of rebellion painted in red. Asterisk. And through it all, the Voxcaster screamed the same three words, over and over, as if repetition alone could rebuild an empire. Asterisk, faith is strength. But no one was listening anymore. By the third lunar cycle, without contact from orbit, Vardos IX had become a world split in two. The upper spires, still clinging to ritual and order, the lower hives pulsing with whispers of liberation. The imperial Aquila, that once adorned every avenue, was now veiled in soot and graffiti. Its twin-headed gaze, blinded by the smoke of its own shrines. The Arbites could no longer patrol entire sectors. Administratum, clerks stopped reporting to duty, and in the vast manufactoria, where the machine spirits once sang through the clang of hammers, only echoes remained. Asterisk, Tavian moved through the chaos like a ghost. He worked when he could, traded when he must, and listened to the rumors carried through the Voxays. The governor, they said, had sealed himself within his palace fortress, surrounded by a dwindling guard. The upper habs were rationing oxygen now, and somewhere in the Hive, Merek Dalen's sermons had turned from whispers to open proclamation. No one called it rebellion yet. They called it awakening. Asterisk. The day the Arbites fell came without warning. A column of armored enforcers marched into the lower sectors to quell a food riot, their vox horns demanding submission in the Emperor's name. The crowd answered with stones and molten slag. One of the Arbites fired first, a single bolt shell that tore through a starving mother clutching her child. That was all it took. Asterisk, the mob surged. Flames bloomed like flowers of vengeance. The Arbites fell back, their armor blackened by promethium. Tavian watched it happen from the upper gantry of a hab spire, the sky flickering orange from the fires below. He should have felt horror. He should have prayed. But what he felt instead was something colder. Inevitability. Asterisk, that night, he returned to the chapel beneath Delta. Hundreds were there now, faces lit by flickering lumens. The Emperor's statue still stood shrouded, but new symbols had been carved into the walls. A rising sun, a broken chain, a hand reaching from flame. Asterisk, Merek Dalen stood at the altar, his robes torn, his voice stronger than ever. Asterisk, you have seen it, he said, his tone both mournful and exultant. The mask has cracked. The false light flickers. The Imperium starves its own children and calls it devotion. But we will no longer kneel. The crowd murmured in response, low and trembling. They will call us heretics, Merek said, raising his hand. They will call us lost. But tell me, what is heresy when the truth itself has rotted? The Emperor was flesh once. He can die as flesh dies. And when he does, the chains that bind humanity to his corpse will fall. Asterisk, a shiver passed through the chamber. Some wept. Some screamed. Tavian said nothing. He looked upon the shrouded statue, and for the first time in his life, he felt no reverence, only sorrow. Asterisk. When the sermon ended, Merek approached him. You were there, he said quietly, at the manufactorum, when the power failed. Tavian nodded, uncertain how the man knew. You felt it too, Merek continued. The silence, That is not the Emperor's wrath. It is the universe remembering it can breathe without him. The words lodged in Tavian's mind like a blade. Outside, the air was thick with ash. Enforcer patrols no longer entered this district. The people had taken control of the Vox Towers, broadcasting Merek's voice across the hive. The planetary guard fractured. Some units remained loyal to the governor, others defected. The first open battles began in the streets, thunderous echoes rolling through the spires. Then came the omen. The twin suns of Vardos dimmed for 3 full minutes. Every lumen strip, every reactor core, every machine altar went dark. The entire planet plunged into shadow, and in that unnatural night, millions of people lifted their heads to the sky and saw, for the first time, the vastness of the void above them. Stars cold and merciless. No astronomica invisible. No light of terror reaching this far. When the power returned, something in the hearts of Vardos' people had changed. The Emperor's light had not reached them. Therefore, they reasoned, he had abandoned them. The uprising became doctrine. The sermons turned to manifestos. Tavian found himself caught between fear and conviction, drawn further into Merek's circle as the hive above them began to die. The governor issued his final broadcast, a trembling plea wrapped in authority. By decree of the Holy Terror, he said, his voice breaking through static. All rebellious sectors will face exterminatus-level sanction. Lay down your arms and repent. But no one believed him. No one repented. In the last days before the storm, Tavian stood upon the balcony of the manufactorum and watched the city below burn. The banners of the Imperium had been torn down, replaced by crude emblems of the sun rising over the Aquila's corpse. The air reeked of smoke and oil and fear. Yet through the chaos, he heard music, voices raised not in prayer, but in song. A song of defiance. A song of men who believed they were finally free. He wanted to believe it too, but somewhere deep within him, a voice whispered that freedom bought with blasphemy is only the first step toward damnation. And high above the planet, beyond the dying light of its suns, something vast and cold stirred, a ripple of warp energy that brushed against reality like the breath of judgment. The Imperium had seen the signal. The Emperor's gaze had turned toward Vardos IX. And soon, his vengeance would follow. The hive trembled, not from war yet, but from the weight of voices. Deep in the Undercity, the air was alive with chanting. It rolled through the iron corridors like a storm front, echoing off the bones of Manufactoria, long abandoned. Thousands gathered in the dark, workers, scavengers, deserters, even broken servitors that had torn free from their master's commands. They came to hear the voice that had shaken an entire world. Merek Dalen stood before them, lit by a halo of firelight from a circle of burning promethium drums. His face was smeared with ash, his eyes bright with exhaustion and fury. Around him, the walls still bore the remnants of the Emperor's sigils, half-melted, scarred, and bleeding rust. Yet in this ruin, the people saw something sacred, a truth their ancestors had been forbidden to speak. He raised his arms. The crowd fell silent. For 10,000 years, Merek began, his voice low, resonant, almost tender. We have labored beneath a sun that was never ours. We built the Emperor's empire with our blood, our bones, our sons. And what did he give us in return? Silence answered him. Nothing. He thundered. No word, no sign, no mercy. The throne devours worlds to keep his corpse alive, and we call it holiness. The crowd roared. Fists rose. The sound was not joy but grief transfigured into rage. Tavian watched from the edge of the assembly, his heart pounding. The fire's glow caught on faces around him, scarred, hollow, human. He could see the desperation that had drawn them here, and though part of him recoiled at Merek's blasphemy, another part could not deny its pull. When Merek spoke again, his tone softened. You have all felt it, haven't you? The silence in your prayers, the hollow sky, the feeling that when you call, no one answers. That is not madness. That is truth. He paced slowly through the crowd, his tattered robes brushing against the soot-stained floor. The Emperor's light is gone, but that does not mean we are blind. We can kindle our own fire. We can make our own dawn, no longer slaves to a dead god. In that moment, the crowd began to chant, not the hymns of the ecclesiarchy, but a new creed, raw and broken. No masters, no thrones, no chains. The words echoed through the sublevels, carried by hidden voxlinks, repeated by mouths that trembled and wept as they spoke. In the spires above, the last loyal priests of the ecclesiarchy, heard the sound, and trembled. Asterisk by the next rotation. The rebellion had a name, the Covenant of Flame. Asterisk, they did not call themselves traitors. They called themselves the Awakened. They painted their symbols, the rising sun overshadowed wings on walls, vehicles, even their own skin. They moved in cells, guided by whispers from the Underhive, and rumors of Merek's miracles. Some claimed that he had healed the sick. Others said he had faced a squad of Arbites, and their weapons had jammed as if by divine will. Whether true or not, belief gave the stories power. Asterisk, Tavian was drawn deeper into their midst. He helped smuggle supplies through the Hab tunnels, carrying food and ammunition scavenged from abandoned depots. At first, it was survival, a way to live in a world collapsing into madness. But slowly, almost unwillingly, he began to believe. Asterisk, one night, Merek summoned him privately to a ruined administratum hall that had become their command chamber. The room was lit by a single data slate, its flickering glow illuminating maps, ration records, and intercepted Vox signals. Asterisk, they're coming, Merek said. His voice was calm, not fearful. The Imperium cannot ignore silence for this long. They will send ships, soldiers, fire. We have little time. Asterisk, Tavian hesitated. Can we fight them? Asterisk, Merek looked at him then, and in his eyes was both pity and conviction. No, we cannot fight the Imperium, but we can make them remember us. Asterisk, he turned toward the cracked window, where the faint shimmer of the hive's outer walls glowed against the night. Every empire forgets its slaves eventually. Let ours be the reminder carved in fire. Asterisk, Tavian wanted to protest, to ask what freedom was worth if it ended in ashes. But the words would not come. The fire in Merek's voice consumed out. Asterisk, above them, alarms began to sound. Somewhere high in the spire, the planetary defense array had detected movement beyond the atmosphere. The crowd in the streets froze as the night sky flashed with streaks of light. Asterisk, they thought, for a heartbeat, that it was the dawn of their promised day. Asterisk, but Tavian knew better. Those lights were not suns rising. They were ships descending, and their arrival would mark the beginning of the end. The first dropships tore through the atmosphere like burning meteors. Their contrails carved bright scars across the night, lighting the hive's black towers in fleeting, ghostly gold. From the Undercity, the people watched in silence, some with awe, others with terror. The Covenant's hymns faltered into whispers. Asterisk, the Voxnet crackled alive, heavy with static and the mechanical tone of Imperial command. Asterisk, attention, citizens of Hive Decilium, this world is under the authority of the Imperium of Man. Unauthorized gatherings, heretical speech, and rebellion against the Emperor's divine order are punishable by death. Dispersed immediately. Asterisk, the message repeated, echoing across miles of ferrocrete and metal. Then the guns began to fire. Asterisk, shells exploded through the upper hablocks, turning glass and bone into dust. The sky rained ash and fire. Servitors marched through the streets, their voices chanting binary prayers to purify the unclean. The Abids came next, black-armored enforcers, with visors like mirrors, faceless, merciless, and behind them, descending from the burning sky, came the Golden Giants. A detachment of Adeptus Custodes, dispatched from the Segmentum command. Their arrival alone, a sign of the Imperium's fear. Never before had such beings been sent to crush a single hive uprising. Their armor gleamed like the wrath of gods, their halberds leaving trails of red light with every swing. Asterisk, to the Covenant, it was the coming of apocalypse. To the Imperium, it was simply cleansing. Asterisk, Tavian stood with Merek in the lower tunnels, listening to the distant screams. They're slaughtering everyone, he said, his voice breaking. Even those who never followed us. Asterisk, they were never innocent, Merek replied. His tone was calm, almost serene. No one is innocent in the Emperor's empire. Every man is born with his chains around his throat. Asterisk, but we can't win, Tavian whispered. We don't have weapons. Or ships. Asterisk, Merek turned to him sharply. Do you think this is about winning? We were never meant to survive. We were meant to awaken. Asterisk, he reached out and pressed something into Tavian's hands. A small, jagged shard of crystal, faintly pulsing with crimson light. Asterisk, what is this? Asterisk, the truth, Merek said softly. It came to me in a vision, from beyond the veil. It speaks to me in the silence, where the Emperor does not. Take it. When the fire comes, it will show you what we really are. Asterisk, Tavian felt the shard's warmth spreading through his palm, thrumming like a heartbeat. For a moment, he thought he heard something, not words, but a whisper that brushed the edges of his mind. Asterisk, then, the walls shook, the tunnels lit up with gunfire. The Custodes had breached the Underhive. They moved like living suns. Every blow a miracle of destruction. Bolter rounds tore through concrete, walls, and bodies alike. The rebels' lasguns flashed feebly against their armor, doing nothing but spark and scream. The Covenant's followers scattered, some praying, some running, some laughing in hysterical defiance. Merek stood unmoving, his arms spread wide as the Golden Warriors approached. You serve a corpse. He called out, we serve the living truth. Strike me down, and you strike at what waits beneath your throne. The custodian leveled his guardian spear, but before he could strike, the shard in Tavian's hand erupted with light. A wave of pressure swept the chamber. The air itself seemed to bend, reality shivering as if it had been cut open. The Custodes staggered, their helmets turned toward Tavian, their augurs flaring with warnings. From the wound in the air came a voice vast, ancient, patient. We have waited, it said, and now, you have called. The hive shook, as if alive. Lights shattered, metal warped, and the chanting of the Covenant turned into screams. Merek fell to his knees, eyes blazing with ecstasy. Do you see, Tavian? He cried. He was never our god, but they have always been listening. The voice came again, this time from everywhere, from the walls, the machines, even the blood-soaked floor. Faith is a door, and you have opened it. The Custodes, realizing what was happening, unleashed volleys of fire into the heart of the distortion. But it was too late. The veil tore. Something vast and formless reached through, a storm of whispering light and shadow, impossible geometry, and hunger wrapped in promise. The Custodes fought like angels against the impossible, their armor cracking under the weight of unreality. Tavian screamed as the shard burned through his flesh, fusing into his arm. Visions flooded his mind, stars bleeding, thrones collapsing, gods whispering his name. When the light faded, the Custodes were gone. So was most of the hive. Merek stood in the ruins, smiling faintly, blood running from his eyes. The Emperor sent his angels, he murmured, and still, the darkness answered first. Above the broken city, the clouds boiled crimson. The Covenant's rebellion was dead, but something far older had been born. The fires of Decilium Delta burned for 9 days. Entire sectors had collapsed into molten rivers of glass and steel. The air reeked of ozone and scorched flesh. Overhead, Imperial warships drifted like silent judges, their cannons still glowing from orbital bombardment. When the flames finally died, the silence that followed was almost holy. From the smoldering dust rose the banners of the Inquisition. Their landers touched down amid the ruins with the precision of a ritual. Vox chants filled the air, invoking purity and flame. The red-robed acolytes of the Ordo Hereticus descended first, their Uspex scanners humming, recording every trace of heresy left in the rubble. Then came the interrogator, Inquisitor Malthus Kaiji, his armor lacquered black, his face half hidden behind a rebreather, carved in the shape of a skull. He stepped into the ash without hesitation. Every bootprint he left seemed to bleed into the dust, as if the planet itself recoiled from his presence. Purge complete, said one of the acolytes, kneeling. No survivors detected in sectors 12 through 23. Malthus did not reply. He simply looked toward the horizon, where the great spire of Hive Decilium Delta lay split in two like a broken sword. The Vox logs indicate a psychic anomaly. The acolyte continued nervously. Moments before orbital sanction, an energy surge of unknown origin registered across the noosphere. It matched nothing in the Imperial archives. Ked's voice came low and cold. Nothing matches, until it kills enough of us to earn a name. He began to walk toward the ruins of the lower hive, where the Covenant had made their stand. The others followed in silence. The Undercity was a tomb. Twisted servitors hung from broken conduits, their flesh fused to metal, their eyes dim. Graffiti still marked the walls, crude pictograms of a burning sun crossed with an open eye, the symbol of the Covenant. Ked knelt beside one wall, running his gauntlet over the sigil. The paint shimmered faintly in the dim light, as though alive. Residual warp saturation, said one of his tech priests, scanning it, but localized, contained. Ked's eyes narrowed. Contained by what? The tech priest hesitated. Unknown. The readings suggest something deliberate, as if the warp energy was not released, but bound. Bound. That word clung to the air like smoke. Ked straightened and looked deeper into the tunnels. Prepare a pesishield perimeter, No Vox transmissions. No prayers. Nothing leaves this place until I say so. Asterisk. The deeper they went, the more the world seemed to change. The air grew colder. The walls began to hum, faintly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat buried beneath a stone. Then they found it. A circle of scorched ground, surrounded by bones. In the center, a blackened figure, still kneeling, its flesh long since charred to ash. The remnants of a man burned alive, but preserved by something unseen. Asterisk. Malthus stopped. The others hung back instinctively. Even the auspexes began to fail, their screens flickering. Asterisk. Inquisitor, whispered one of the What? What is that? Asterisk. Ked stepped closer. A witness. Asterisk. He reached into his cloak and withdrew a relic, a sanctified data slate, engraved with the seal of the Inquisition. Its surface flickered with lines of script. He began to record. Asterisk. Subject appears human, male, severe warp burn consistent with exposure to uncontrolled psychic resonance. Localized anomaly at ground zero. Possible conduit. Asterisk. He gestured for the server skull to scan the corpse. The little machine whirred, lights flickering, and then, abruptly, it froze mid-air. Its optical lens turned red. The acolyte stepped back. Sir. Asterisk. Ked's hand went to his bolt pistol. Hold. The servo skull's voice changed, its tone low, almost human. We remember. Asterisk. The Inquisitor's weapons snapped up. The skull's lights flared, and for a moment, the burned corpse's eyes glowed faintly beneath their crusted sockets. Asterisk. Ked fired once. The skull exploded into fragments. Silence. Then, from somewhere far below, came the sound of something moving. Asterisk. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't alive. It was like the world itself had exhaled. Asterisk. The tech priests. Auspex began screaming in binary. Warp breach. No, not a breach. It's shifting. The pattern is moving beneath us. Asterisk. Ked looked at the corpse again, and saw it. The charred hands were fused around something embedded in the chest cavity. A faintly glowing crystal. Pulsing like a heart. Asterisk. He remembered the reports. A shard, found among the rebels. Origin unknown. He had dismissed them as rumor. But now, Asterisk. Seal this chamber, he ordered. No one leaves until I understand what this is. Asterisk. As his team moved to obey, he felt something brush against his mind. A whisper. Asterisk. We open the door. You are the next to walk through. Asterisk. He froze. The others heard nothing. Only the low hum of power in the walls. Asterisk. For the first time in years, Malthus Ked, Inquisitor, slayer of heretics, breaker of covenants, felt doubt. Asterisk. And the ashes around him stirred, as if something beneath them was waking up. Asterisk. Hours passed. Though time no longer seemed to move the same way beneath the ruins. The deeper they ventured, the more the hive felt wrong, like its bones had been rearranged while no one was looking. Corridors no longer matched the schematics. Doors led to places that could not exist. Sometimes the Auspex would flash a signal of an open space ahead, only for the team to find a solid wall when they arrived. Asterisk. Ked led them with a lantern of consecrated flame, its light shivering across the metal like liquid gold. He moved carefully, every step echoing down the dark. Behind him, his retinue followed the tech priest Omrillus, with his Auspex array humming softly. The acolyte Moran, whispering prayers under her breath, and a pair of stormtroopers whose eyes darted everywhere, but never met their masters. Asterisk. The silence was heavy, not the silence of emptiness, but of listening. Asterisk. Warp resonance still rising. Omrillus reported, his Vox voice trembling with static, yet no trace of breach. It is intelligent, as if the signal itself reacts to our movement. Asterisk. Ked's reply came low and even. Then let us see what it wishes to show us. Asterisk. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. It had once been a manufactorum sublevel. You could still see the remnants of conveyor belts and heavy cranes suspended above. But everything mechanical had been fused, melted into grotesque shapes, like wax figures caught mid-mo. The air shimmered faintly, and at the center stood a column of light. Not bright, not blinding, but soft, pale, and alive. Like moonlight trapped underwater, it poured upward from the ground, vanishing into the ceiling's dark. Asterisk. Marin crossed herself instinctively with the Aquila. By the throne, she whispered, is that the warp? Asterisk. Ked shook his head. No, the warp doesn't wait. This has been here a long time. Asterisk. He approached slowly, the lantern's flame bending away from the column as if repelled. The closer he came, the louder the whisper in his mind became. Dozens of voices, overlapping, murmuring half prayers, half screams. Asterisk. When he touched the edge of the light, his vision fractured. Asterisk. He saw the hive, not as ruin, but whole. Its towers alive with motion. He saw men and women kneeling in the streets, chanting to something unseen above, and behind them vast figures of shadow, shaped like men, but woven from starlight and hunger. Asterisk, a voice spoke within the vision. Soft, reverent, terrible. Asterisk, they built their faith on ashes. We built ours on the truth that bleeds between them. Asterisk, Ked gasped, stepping back. The image shattered like glass. His acolytes rushed forward, but he waved them off. I'm fine. But he wasn't. Something had followed him back. He could feel it watching from behind his thoughts. Asterisk Omrlis, he said after a long pause. Record everything. I want no detail lost. We'll purge this level after full documentation. Asterisk, the tech priest hesitated. Inquisitor, I would advise against. Asterisk, I did not request counsel. Ked cut in. His tone was calm, but final. Asterisk, the others obeyed. Usbek's beams danced across the chamber, recording shapes, textures, readings that made no sense. Energy signatures inverted themselves. Gravity spiked in localized bursts, and through it all, the whisper persisted. Asterisk Marin began muttering louder now, her prayers turning desperate. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects. Ked turned toward her, and froze. Behind her, the air shimmered. Something was moving within the column of light. A shape, human, almost. Kneeling, hands outstretched. Ked raised his lantern, the light washing over the figure, and his breath caught. It was Merek, or what was left of him. Asterisk, his flesh was translucent, veins glowing faintly red. His eyes were black voids, yet burning with strange serenity. He looked up, lips moving soundlessly, and the whispering stopped. Asterisk, then a single word filled the chamber, spoken not by him, but through him. Asterisk, remember. Asterisk, the word hit them like a shockwave. Omrlis screamed as his senses overloaded, electricity arcing from his mech. The troopers opened fire instinctively, their lost bolts disappearing into the column without effect. Asterisk, Ked drew his bolt pistol but didn't fire. Instead, he stared, not in fear, but recognition. Asterisk, he saw now what the shard had done. It hadn't just opened a door, it had merged something. The psychic echo of the hive's last moment burned into reality itself. Merek was its vessel, his death a binding. Asterisk, and if Ked was right, it was calling for him. The voice came again, softer now, almost tender. You came to burn what you do not understand. You came to silence the echo that carries your own name. Asterisk, Ked gritted his teeth. You presume too much. Asterisk, do I? You serve a throne that feeds on souls, a god who cannot speak. Yet here, in the ashes of your purity, I offer you truth. Asterisk, for a moment, just a heartbeat, Ked felt temptation, not belief, not surrender, but curiosity. Asterisk, what if this was the truth? What if the Emperor's silence was not divine restraint, but emptiness? Asterisk, then, in the corner of his eye, he saw Marin kneeling, tears streaming, whispering something to the light. Asterisk, Ked's instincts snapped back. He fired. Asterisk, the bolt round struck her in the chest, killing her instantly. The others froze. Asterisk, no communion. Ked said quietly, not here, not with it. Asterisk, he turned back to the light, his face cold as stone. Asterisk, whatever you are, he whispered, you were not the first to whisper promises in the dark, and you will not be the last to die for it. Asterisk, he raised the sanctified relic at his hip, a fragment of St. Drustan's heart, sealed in glass, and pressed it against the column. Asterisk, for a heartbeat. The world screamed. Then the light went out. The chamber fell silent. The whispers ceased. Asterisk and Ked knew, in the hollow of his mind, that something had merely shifted, not destroyed, just waiting. Asterisk, when they emerged hours later, the Inquisitor gave a single order to the orbiting fleet. Asterisk, exterminatus denied, quarantine instead. This world still speaks. Asterisk, as he left the ruins, a faint red glow followed him from beneath the earth, pulsing once, like a heartbeat. Asterisk, asterisk. It had been 47 days since Decilium Delta burned. Asterisk, 47 days since Inquisitor Malthus Ked returned to Terra, and not once, in that time, had he slept. Asterisk, the halls of the Inquisitorial fortress were silent, save for the whispers of the dead. He walked through them as a ghost among ghosts, his boots echoing off marble floors, carved with the words, ignorance is strength, purity is duty. Every lumen flickered as he passed, as though reluctant to shine upon him. Asterisk, he carried the shard. It was sealed in 9 layers of stasis field containment, wrapped in hexagrammic wards, and locked inside. A sanctified reliquary forged on Mars. Yet he could still feel it, pulsing faintly through the metal. like a heart that refused to die. Asterisk, the others had told him to destroy it. The Adeptus Mechanicus had pleaded to study it. The Ecclesiarchy had called it an abomination, a seat of heresy, but Ked could not. Asterisk, because when he looked at it too long, he didn't see corruption. He saw truth. It was evening, though on Terra, night never truly came. The sky was a smog-filled veil of golden light, forever lit by the reflection of the astral. Ked stood upon the balcony of the fortress's upper spire, watching the distant glow. Somewhere within that radiance, the Emperor still sat a god-made prisoner by his own divinity. Asterisk, he wondered if the Emperor could see him now, if he could feel the shard's presence, and if he feared it. A soft hiss of hydraulics echoed behind him. "You've been recalled, Inquisitor," came a voice old, dry, heavy with the weight of centuries. Asterisk, Ked turned. Standing in the doorway was Lord Virus Hal, Master of the Order Hereticus, his crimson robes trimmed with gold, his face hidden behind a mask of beaten silver. Asterisk, they've convened a conclave. Halland continued. You've brought something from Desilium that's set Mars and the Ecclesiarchy at each other's throats. The High Lords want answers. Asterisk, Ked inclined his head. Then they shall have them. Asterisk, Halland studied him for a long moment. You've changed, Malthus. Asterisk, Ked's expression didn't flicker. So has the truth. Asterisk, the chamber of the High Lords was unlike any place in the galaxy, vast enough to hold the dreams and fears of an empire. Gold and marble, flame and shadow, saints carved into the walls, their faces eroded by incense, smoke, and time. At the center stood the great circular table, each seat filled by power, the Ecclesiarch, the Fabricator, the Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum, the Lord Commander, Militant, and others whose names were spoken only in whispers. Asterisk. Ked stood before them like a man walking into judgment. Asterisk, a servo-servant carried the reliquary forward and set it upon the table. The wards shimmered faintly as it was placed. Even the lords leaned back instinctively, as though the object itself might speak. Asterisk, begin, said his voice was deep and sonorous, meant to fill cathedrals. Explain what you found upon Desilium. Asterisk, Ked nodded once. A heretical cult known as the Covenant of the New Dawn rose in Hive Delta. We believed them to be typical apostates born of deprivation and despair, but their heresy was older, rooted in something beneath the world itself. Asterisk, he gestured toward the reliquary. This, the source, a shard of unknown material, not Xenos, not warp, something else entirely. It manifests psychic resonance, structured, responsive, self-aware. Asterisk, the Fabricator General's voice came next, a mechanical rasp through Vox. Your report claims it survived the flame of a custodian's halberd. Asterisk, it did, Ked replied, and when I sealed it, it whispered. Asterisk, the Ecclesiarch's eyes narrowed. Whispered. Asterisk, Ked's gaze held steady. Words I did not understand. A name I cannot recall. But its voice was not the warp. It was something older, something the warp itself seemed to avoid. A silence settled. Then the Grand Master of Assassins leaned forward. You risked damnation bringing this to Terra. Asterisk, Ked's lips tightened faintly. I risked ignorance spreading faster. Asterisk, Halland spoke from the shadows. The Inquisition exists to face what others cannot. Ked has done what duty demands, but what he brought back may demand more. Asterisk, the Ecclesiarch rose to his feet, robes flowing like blood. You speak as if this object has a will. That is heresy. Asterisk, Ked looked up at him. So is believing the Emperor still speaks. Asterisk, the chamber froze. Even the servolights flickered. Asterisk, the Ecclesiarch's voice turned to thunder. You dare, asterisk, but Ked spoke over him. Calm, measured, deadly. I have stood upon the ashes of worlds. I have watched faith burn brighter than plasma fire, and die just as is. The shard did not tempt me with false gods. It showed me what faith is. A weapon the galaxy wields against its own fear. The Covenant knew this. They did not rebel against the Emperor. They sought to understand what he keeps buried beneath his throne. Asterisk, the Fabricator General's vox clicked. What are you implying, Inquisitor? Asterisk, Ked's eyes lifted to the gilded ceiling. That the Emperor is not the only one who sleeps. Asterisk, for a long moment. No one spoke. Then Halland broke the silence. You are treading on heresy, dangerous ground. I tread where truth takes me, Ked said softly. The Ecclesiarch gestured sharply. That thing must be destroyed. Atomized. Cast into the core of a sun, if need be. Asterisk. Ked looked down at the reliquary. The faint pulse within it quickened, almost like it heard. Asterisk. He felt the whisper again, threading through his mind. Asterisk. They fear me. You understand me. Asterisk, he closed his eyes for a breath, then spoke. Asterisk, destroy it, and you destroy what we could become. Asterisk, the lords erupted in outrage, shouting over one another. Only Halland remained silent, his mask reflecting the flickering flame. Asterisk, finally. The ecclesiarch slammed his staff upon the floor. Enough. The High Lords will deliberate. Until then, the artifact is to be sealed beneath the Imperial Palace. And you, Inquisitor, Ked, are to remain confined within the fortress until judgment is passed. Asterisk, Ked bowed slightly, concealing the faintest smile. He had seen the fear in their eyes. He had seen the light answer that fear from within the reliquary. Asterisk. And he knew somewhere beneath Terra's stone heart, something ancient was beginning to stir. Asterisk, the cell was meant for dangerous men, heretics, sorcerers, assassins. It was not meant for an inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus. Ked sat in the darkness, the faint hum of psychic wards pressing against his skull. There was no sound except the measured throb of his own heartbeat, and beneath it, a rhythm he could no longer tell was real or remembered. Asterisk, the walls glowed faintly with the soft blue of containment sigils. Beyond them, guards of the Adeptus Custodes stood motionless, as they had for centuries. To most men, their presence would have been reassuring. To Ked, it was irony. Asterisk, he had fought beside their kind on this. He had seen their perfection, their silent faith, their unwavering certainty, and yet now they guarded him, as if the idea of doubt itself were contagion. Asterisk, he leaned back against the cold wall, eyes closed. The whisper came again. You have carried me far. Malthus, Ked. He did not move. They fear what you bring, yet they built their thrones upon it. Asterisk, he exhaled slowly. You are an echo, nothing more. Asterisk, the voice chuckled, soft and almost human. If I am an echo, then what are you? The Emperor's shadow speaks louder than his light. Asterisk, the words sank deep, stirring something he had buried long ago. The memory of Terra before he joined the Inquisition, the crowded slums near the sanctum, the endless sermons about duty and faith, the quiet doubt he'd felt even as a child when priests spoke of the Emperor's eternal vigilance, while billions starved in his name. Asterisk, he opened his eyes. The cell was dark again, but the air shimmered faintly, like heat haze, and he realized the wards were failing. Asterisk, the sigils dimmed, one by one. Asterisk, a sound like cracking glass filled the chamber, soft and distant. Then, silence. Asterisk, Ked rose. The door was still sealed, the Custodes unmoving, yet the pressure in his head lifted, like a storm passing. Asterisk, and then he saw it. A faint line of light tracing along the floor, leading toward the far wall. Not white, but the same pale red as the shard. He followed it. The wall rippled, bending inward like liquid metal, and opened into a narrow corridor he had never seen before, one that could not exist within the fortress's blueprints. The whisper guided him. Come below. Come see what your Emperor guards. Asterisk, he descended. The corridor was ancient, older than the fortress itself. The air grew warmer the deeper he went, thick with the scent of oil, incense, and dust that had not been disturbed for millennia. Symbols of the Imperium, the Aquila, the sigillite's mark adorned the walls, but many were cracked, or half overwritten by glyphs he did not recognize. Asterisk, eventually, the passage opened into a vast cavern, lit not by lumen, but by a pulsing crimson glow. Ked stopped. Before him stretched a colossal chamber, its walls lined with machinery the size of cathedrals. Tubes, conduits, and cables ran like veins into the earth below, feeding into a single monumental structure at its center, a pillar of black stone and gold that reached upward into darkness. It was carved with prayers in 1,000 dead languages. Asterisk, and at its base, suspended in a cage of light, floated something small, the shard's twin. Asterisk, Ked approached slowly, awe and dread twisting together. The air vibrated around the relic, warping sound and sight alike. He could see the faint outline of faces within the glow, not living but imprinted, like ghosts trapped in amber. Asterisk, do you understand now? The voice murmured. They found us once before, long ago, before your Emperor's throne began to burn. Asterisk, Ked's breath caught. This is under Terra. Asterisk, beneath the palace. The voice confirmed. Beneath the golden corpse who feeds upon souls. He took what he could not destroy, bound it here, buried it deep. Asterisk, Ked stared upward, the enormity of it sinking in. You're saying the Emperor, asterisk, he feared us, not for what we were, but for what we might reveal. Asterisk, the light pulsed stronger, and Ked saw visions again, not like before, not fragments, but clarity. He saw the age of strife, worlds burning, psychos screaming as the warp tore reality apart. And then, a figure of light, radiant and terrible, bending the storm to his will, the Emperor. But behind him, in the void between stars, something watched. Not chaos, not the warp, something else. Something waiting. Ked fell to one knee, breath shuddering. Then you are another god. Asterisk, the voice laughed softly. God? No. We are the thought that came before gods, the dream that gave them shape. We are the shadow that truth casts when it dares to look at itself. Asterisk, he felt his mind reel. Images flashed: the covenant, the hive burning, the light in Merek's eyes. It all fit together now. The shard was not corruption, it was memory. Asterisk, the Emperor had not destroyed it because he couldn't. It was too fundamental, too close to the thing that even he feared to name. Asterisk, why show me? Ked whispered. Asterisk, because you still doubt, said the voice. And doubt is the seed of creation. You can end the stagnation of his Imperium. You can open the gate he sealed. The relic pulsed once more, brighter than before, and Ked felt something reach into him. It wasn't possession. It wasn't control. It was recognition. Asterisk, he saw flashes of the palace above Custodes turning. Sensing the breach, he heard alarms begin to rise. Asterisk, the voice grew softer, almost sorrowful. He will send his angels. They will burn this truth again, but it will not die. Malthus Ked. For now it lives in you. And then silence. The light dimmed. The shard's twin went dark. Asterisk, footsteps echoed from above, heavy, synchronized, golden. The Custodes were coming. Asterisk, Ked turned away from the relic, his expression unreadable. The whisper was gone from his mind, but its echo remained, quiet and patient. Asterisk, he walked back up through the tunnel, past the sigils, through the fractured cell door, and stood once more before the dawn of Terra's false sun. Asterisk, he did not speak when they arrested him. He did not resist. Asterisk, but as the Custodes bound his hands in chains of sanctified iron, he whispered a single phrase to himself. Words, not of rebellion, but of revelation. Asterisk, even the throne has a shadow. Asterisk, they said the trial of Inquisitor Ked Malthus lasted 7 days. Asterisk, in truth, it lasted far longer, in whispers, in prayer, in the hearts of men who dared to wonder. Asterisk, he was brought before the Senatorum Imperialis, in chains of sanctified gold, flanked by 2 custodians whose eyes did not blink. The chamber was vast, a cathedral of judgment, its walls carved with the names of 1,000,000 martyrs. Every word spoken in that hall echoed like thunder through history. Asterisk, the High Lords spoke with ritual precision, their faces hidden behind veils of silver mesh. The charge was blasphemy. The sentence was predetermined. But even as they spoke, even as their voices merged with the droning hymns of the ecclesia, a tremor rippled through the chamber, not physical, but spiritual, like the collective exhalation of something vast and unseen. Ked said nothing. He stood before them, gaunt and silent, his eyes fixed on the hollow sigil of the Imperial Aquila above. The left wing flickered once. Faintly, the Custodes noticed. Some claimed it was merely a power fluctuation, a fault in the systems that had burned uninterrupted for millennia. But those who stood closest to Ked swore they felt something stir in the air, a pulse, like the heartbeat of a living world beneath their feet. Asterisk, when the trial concluded, he was sentenced to oblivion, memory erasure, body consigned to the null vaults beneath the palace, name struck from every archive. But such decrees meant little when words had already taken root. Asterisk, because by then, the whispers had begun. Asterisk, they started in the lower decks of Terra, among the manufactoria workers who toiled without sun or rest, beneath the roar of vengeance that powered the Imperium's heart. Men and women who had never seen the sky began speaking of dreams of light that was not the Astronomican's glow, of voices whispering from beneath the throne itself. Asterisk, at first, the ecclesiarchy dismissed it as madness, then as heresy, then silence. Because the dreams did not stop. Tech adepts on Mars began recording faint psychic tremors, aligning perfectly with Terra's orbital cycle. Choirs aboard Imperial vessels reported new harmonics threading through their songs, discordant yet strangely beautiful. And the navigators, those cursed with warp sight, began to see a second radiance behind the Astronomican, faint as a dying ember, but growing. They called it the Echo Light. Officially, it did not exist. Unofficially, even the Adeptus Astra Telepathica began to fear it. Asterisk, in the vaults of the Ordo Hereticus, Ked's case file was sealed by order of the Inquisition Conclave, yet one copy remained half-burned and unsigned. Found months later by an acolyte named Tavian Holt, she read the final line of Ked's notes. The words scrawled in his own blood before they took him. Asterisk, he is not asleep. He dreams, and dreams have gravity. Those words spread faster than any official decree. Across the Imperium, rumors grew. Some said Ked had spoken directly to the Emperor in his dreaming form. Others claimed he had uncovered an older power beneath the Golden Throne, a relic of the Dark Age of technology, that the Emperor had bound to his will. A few whispered darker things still, that the throne did not sustain the Emperor, but feed upon him, endlessly consuming his divine essence to keep the light burning. Asterisk, and through it all, something changed in the warp. Asterisk, PSYKERS, began to dream of a sea of red glass, of a voice that was neither human nor demon, calling them toward the heart of soul. The black ships grew restless. The Adeptus Custodes doubled their watch. Asterisk, yet the light did not falter. It shimmered. Asterisk, some aboard the Astronomicon claimed to see shapes moving within it, silhouettes of angels, wings unfurling in gold and flame. Others swore they saw shadows beneath, vast and patient, like God's awakening. Asterisk, 1 year to the day after Ked's execution, a tremor shook the foundations of the Imperial Palace. Asterisk, sensors registered it as a seismic anomaly, but the priests of the Mechanicus, who analyzed the data, found something impossible. The vibration did not originate from below. It came from within the throne itself. Asterisk, the Custodes sealed the chamber for 7 hours. No records of what happened exist, save one, a single Vox transmission, intercepted by the Sisters of Silence, before the silence returned. Asterisk, a single voice, speaking through static, saying only, asterisk, he remembers. Asterisk, from that day onward, strange omens multiplied. The ecclesiarchy began to rewrite certain litany, lines once ending in by his eternal stillness, now read by his eternal vigilance. Asterisk, pilgrims on Terra claimed to see light seeping through cracks in the palace floor, not the warm gold of the Emperor's glow, but crimson, pulsing like a heartbeat. Asterisk, and on distant worlds, where Ked's name was forbidden, men began to pray to something else, not a god, not a demon, but the idea he had died for. Asterisk, that even in the Imperium of man, truth could bleed through faith. Asterisk, the Inquisition tried to contain it. Hundreds were executed. Dozens of planets declared silent quarantines, but the heresy did not fade, because it did not depend on words. Asterisk, it lived in the way people began to look at the sky differently. Asterisk, it lived in the way tech priests hesitated before invoking the machine god's name. Asterisk, it lived in the way navigators, staring into the warp, whispered that something vast now moved behind the Emperor's light. Asterisk, and perhaps most of all, it lived in the vaults beneath the palace, where a single, extinguished shard of crimson light flickered once more, faint but undeniable. Asterisk, the Custodes never spoke of that day, nor did the High Lords, but some claim that during the feast of the Emperor's ascension, as the endless hymns filled the air, one custodian, nameless, faceless, perfect, paused for a heartbeat. Asterisk, he raised his head toward the throne, as if listening. Asterisk, and though he said nothing, those who stood closest swore they heard a whisper echo through the golden hall, faint as breath, yet vast as eternity. Asterisk, even the throne has a shadow. The storm began without thunder. It was a silence so immense that even the choirs of Terra felt it first. A sudden emptiness, where the warp song had always been. The Astronomicon, that eternal beacon that guided ships across a million stars, flickered, not dimmed, shifted. Asterisk, in the navigator houses, panic erupted. Thousands of psychers screamed in unison as visions poured into their minds. Visions not of void or flame, but of a throne of bones, bleeding light into the dark. Some tore their own eyes out rather than look again. Others fell to their knees, weeping, whispering that the light was alive. Asterisk, the Mechanica stations orbiting Terra recorded impossible readings. Power conduits that had never failed, surged with unholy energy. The very data began to pray, code strings rearranging themselves into liturgical fragments. Vox traffic across Sol went silent. Asterisk, and in that silence, a single sound broke through. Not machine, not human. A heartbeat. It rolled through the palace like thunder, through marble and metal and centuries of dust. The Custodes heard it first. They did not move, did not speak, but they felt the floor tremble beneath their armored boots. The Sisters of Silence felt it too, their psychic voids rippling with unease. Then came the voice. Not through Vox, not through mind, but through memory itself, the shared pulse of every soul that still dared to believe. Asterisk, a voice that was not words, but meaning, a warmth and weight, like the first breath of creation. I have dreamed too long. Asterisk, some fell to their knees, others screamed. Asterisk, the High Lords sealed the throne room within seconds. Hymns rose across the palace, drowning fear in ritual. The ecclesiarchy declared it a miracle, the emperor's mercy manifest. The Mechanicus called it a resonance anomaly. The Inquisition called it impossible. And yet, across the stars, the impossible began to happen. In the far reaches of Segmentum Obscure, a black ship adrift in the warp reported seeing a light within the storms. Not the blinding gold of the but a deep red radiance, like dawn bleeding through cloud. The psychers on board ceased their screaming. For the first time in living memory, they began to sing. On a dying forge world in the galactic east. An entire manufactorum, reactivated after centuries of silence. The machines worked without priests. The cogitators displayed no error. No logic, only one line repeating endlessly. The engine remembers. And on a backwater shrine world forgotten by maps, a boy was born without eyes, yet he could see. He looked up at the stars and said that the emperor was moving again, that his light was walking among the dead stars. The ecclesiarchy burned him alive before dawn. But the people remembered his words. By then, the name Ked had become something else. No longer a man, but a myth. A whispered prayer among soldiers who fought in darkness. A curse among priests who feared truth. A secret blessing on ships that sailed too close to the warp. In his silence, we endure. In his dream, we awaken. No one knew who first said it, but the words spread like fire. Inside the golden throne, unseen by any mortal eye, something vast and wounded stirred. The emperor, or what remained of him, had not spoken in 10,000 years. Yet now, his light flickered with irregular rhythm, like thoughts struggling through agony. Those who attended the throne began to feel the change. The tech priests who maintained the sacred systems reported hallucinations, seeing faces in the golden conduits, hearing whispers from the cooling vents. One swore that he saw a hand, skeletal and radiant, press against the stasis field from within. They silenced him. Of course, his flesh was rendered to data steel, and his name deleted from the archives. But more followed. Then came the dream plague. Across Terra, millions began to share the same vision. A great plain of burning sand. A black sun rising behind the imperial palace, and a man faceless, broken, walking toward it. Some claimed it was the emperor reborn, others claimed it was the end. The ecclesiarchy called it blasphemy, but deep beneath the palace, in the sealed vaults of the Order Heretic, the surviving records of Inquisitor Malthus Ked were reopened. And there, in the final entry, long dismissed as madness, the script glowed faintly with residual warping, as if responding to the dreams of billions. He will wake when the faithful remember why they feared the dark. Decades later, when the Imperium's borders burned under endless war, a strange rumor began to spread through the front lines. Entire Astra Militarum regiments reported sightings of a figure moving across battlefields, cloaked in light and shadow both, untouched by bolt of fire, followed by silence, where demons screamed. No Vox recordings survived. No pict feed remained intact, but those who lived spoke of a single mark left behind on the ground, where the figure had passed, a sigil carved into the dirt by heat alone. The same symbol burned into the walls of Hive Desolaeum, centuries before, the mark of the Covenant. They will tell you this story is heresy, that Ked was a madman, that the Emperor does not dream, cannot change, will never speak. They will tell you that faith requires silence, that obedience is salvation. But beneath the chants and the fire, something has shifted. The Astronomicon burns with two lights now, one gold, one red. The warp grows restless. The gods themselves seem to watch in stillness. And if you stand in the great halls of the Imperial Palace, when the bells toll for the dead and the incense clouds the air, you may feel it too. The faint tremor beneath your feet, the heartbeat of something ancient and awakening. Perhaps it is only the engines. Perhaps it is only faith. Or perhaps the throne itself remembers what it once was. And somewhere, in the dreaming dark between stars, a voice whispers once more, quiet, patient, and terrifyingly human. I am not the end. I am what comes after.